back to the Djellab channel, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, we're in a slightly different area today, but we are, of course, still at the Three Lanterns just off of Leicester Square in Chinatown. So if you are ever in London and want to check out the football, make sure you come down here to do that. Joining me today, Patrick Van Straten. We've only got one mic. I might have forgotten to bring the other one. So we're going to share this and very much kind of speak into it when it's our turn, right? And grab the mic.
Yes.
Exactly. And of course, joining me today as well, Benjamin Bowman. Are you Benjamin, or is it just a Ben?
Just Ben, actually.
Just Ben.
Yeah, just
it's like
Ben.
Joe. Joe's just a Joe, not Joseph. Yeah.
No middle name either, so it's just straight up Ben Bowman.
Ben Bowman, double B.
Exactly.
Double Bs. Okay. Well, as you can see by the title of this video, it's all about Spurs. One of the reasons that Ben is here as well. And it's the classic, the how to fix. Spurs at the moment going through a lot of issues. We're going to go through all of them, talk about possibly a new manager coming in, transfers for now and in the summer, and of course we'll talk about the ownership and injuries as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. I think we've got to kick it off first with, I guess, the current issues. Let's analyse where Spurs are at the moment, Ben, because you've just lost 3-2 away to Everton, a side who cannot score goals at all. They scored 3. They were 3-0 up at half-time. I mean, at half-time, it felt like Ange was going to get sacked in the changing rooms.
Yeah.
As of right now, we're recording this on Thursday. We're playing Hoffenheim tonight. We'll see how that goes. One of the worst teams in Europe, factually.
Yeah.
How do you feel about things at the moment as a Spurs fan, I guess, before you become the sporting director?
Well, yeah, before I take on my dream job. It's not great at all. We're in a real mess right now. Obviously, the Everton game, like you said about Postecoglou getting sacked at half-time, Spurs actually have done that before. Martin Jol got sacked at half-time during the UEFA Cup game against, I think, Getafe. He still managed the second half, to be fair. But
did that for free. Did that for free.
Yeah. Did Levy a favour. But no, I felt the same. I think I've been quite pro-Ange for a long time, and I think a lot of the issues at the club are bigger than him, which we'll obviously get into. Sunday, he changed to a 3 at the back. It just kind of felt like a desperate attempt to... Obviously, we lost Solanke to an injury literally the night before, so we weren't really going into the game with a striker. So whether that affected his plans to affect the shape and the setup, we all thought we were kind of going to get Gray actually in midfield. He was playing a right centre-back role where he just looked completely lost, and he's been fantastic, like, obviously in context, playing at centre-back for the last 20-odd games or so with Dragusin. The back three was just a complete mess. And like you said, Everton don't score goals. Obviously, they've had, obviously Moyes coming back in. They lost their first game against Villa, but a week on the training pitch, a little bit of confidence, but you can't legislate for conceding 3 goals at half-time to Everton.
When you were making Dominic Calvert-Lewin look like a very good striker,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think there are worries there for Spurs' defence, right?
Yeah, like the second goal obviously is a mess from a defensive point of view, like with Gray stepping up, but you can live with getting skinned by Njai to an extent because he's a fantastic player. Calvert-Lewin, and I said it in a video before the game, I was like, we could be in for an all-time... People say about Dr. Tottenham, right? I think we just need to abandon that tag and just accept that we are actually just rubbish. It's not just the fact that we are just cursed necessarily. But Dominic Calvert-Lewin not scored in 16 games. Hoffenheim are imploding, who we're playing tonight. I don't know if you saw Kramarić's interview after they lost to Bayern last week, where he said the club is in a mess. If I speak, I'm in big trouble, that kind of thing. And then Leicester haven't won one away game, I think, all season. We've got them on Sunday. Yeah, we're 1 out of 3 so far with Calvert-Lewin scoring. But Sunday was a mess. Obviously, I think there were people that will say those 2 goals in the second half saved Ange's job. If you believe what you read of the stuff that's coming out of Spurs, that's not necessarily true. Like, they've backed him and said that we back him to get through this difficult period. Once we get the players back, we're trying to put all the right people around him, blah, 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 blah. We're not seeing any evidence of that whatsoever because we're 23 days into January and we've signed a 21-year-old goalkeeper who, to be fair, without him in that first half, it could have been more. He made an unbelievable save from Mangala, I think it was.
He's a good keeper, I think.
Yeah. He obviously struggled a bit in the North London derby, but nowhere near as much.
It was more
was
of his feet, though, rather than anything else.
Corners and everything like that was fine.
Good.
But his feet, he's like, with a goalkeeper like him, we've accepted that he's a young kid. He's going to make mistakes. Playing out from the back,
You'd rather him making mistakes than Fraser Forster, right?
Exactly, yeah. But it's a real mess. The injuries, I think Ange is kind of just almost... He keeps saying that he's, desperate to turn it around and all this stuff. I think after Everton, he just looked a bit beaten. And it's so frustrating with Spurs because we've had so many highs this season in amongst the like really bad lows. We beat Liverpool 2 weeks ago in the first leg of that Carabao Cup semi-final and played really well and deserved to win the game against their pretty much 75% of their first 11. And then, it's just, it's a real mess right now.
Okay, I mean, Pat, one interesting point here I want to make before we get into like the ownership and stuff. The Spurs starting 11 against Everton was a better starting 11 than Everton's. So do you think at that point, like, I feel like Ange has been given a lot of credit in the bank. Do you think at that point that loss was on Ange?
It was better than Everton's. I mean, I think that's kind of a difficult thing to say because, like, is it well suited to play the kind of football you want it to play? And given the injuries, like, there are so many people who've been playing out of position that even if kind of like man for man, they might be better than their opposite number, they're still performing a role that's unfamiliar to them. Like when you see like Jed Spence, who is a right wing back playing as a relatively conventional left back, I think it's not surprising that like he's not going to perform well. Like Dragusin, I think is probably capable of being a pretty good defender, but I don't think he's capable of being a good defender in an aggressive pressing high line system. No. Gray, I think we believe he's super talented, but he's also 18. Yeah. And when you're 18, a super talented 18-year-old, you can tell that they're talented. What people often do is make the mistake for thinking that they're currently good. Yes, exactly. The Premier League is the best league in the world. And if you're a league average centre-back, then you are in the top 1% of that position worldwide. So Archie Gray can look really, really promising while still being far below the level that you need for that position in the Premier League, especially given the fact that every team now, Everton are a team who sacked their coach because they were worried about relegation, and they still have someone like Njai, who is one of the best dribblers in the league and extremely dangerous. Like this is the simple fact. Like every team in the league now has a weapon to hurt you, and when pretty much your entire back line goes down for weeks on end, and it's compounded by the fact that you don't have a really, really great defensive midfielder, and that you're a pressing side, and I think the press could be worked on a little bit. Like then all this stuff has cascading effects. Look at Manchester City. Like Manchester City don't lack a ground eater in the central midfield. They've also slowly moved away from being an elite pressing side, and it's not just Rodri getting injured. It's like Rodri gets injured and 4 or 5 other things happen at the same time. Sometimes that happens, but I don't know. I think I'm more positive on Spurs than most people, just because I find the narrative that's building of like how Ange's position is untenable. I find it kind of ludicrous. Like it's so explicable, the problems at Tottenham. It's not like, oh my god, like why are they playing so far below their level? It's like they got a bunch of injuries, and also there are loads of close games that have pretty much all gone against Spurs. So generally speaking, games that are close, so within kind of like 1 XG, the opponent, like normally you expect to win some of those games, lose some of those games, and draw some of those games. And if a team's winning all those games, it'll come back. They will stop winning all those games. If a team's losing all those games, it will come back. They'll stop losing all those games. This is not an area where we see managers like just tend to eke out results in those games.
Yeah.
This is just variance. It happens to everybody. When Spurs, I think, have lost like 9 out of 11 games that have been in that category, that will come back round.
I think we've lost every single game where we've lost the XG battle. We've lost every single game, and we've had so many games where like Ipswich at home or maybe Brighton away, where we've dominated the football, but we've had, Brighton maybe not the best example, but Ipswich at home, for example, where dominate the football, they hit us on the break twice, we make mistakes, they convert 2 really high XG chances close to our goal, and then sit back. Newcastle, the same thing. And then we can't break them down. And breaking teams down is a hard thing to do. Arne Slot came out and said after the Nottingham Forest game that breaking down teams who sit in a low block is difficult. And managers who wouldn't usually kind of be that blunt, that's kind of a sort of a thing a fan would say. And it was almost like, well, it's not good enough, you have to find a way. But sometimes it is hard. But when you open yourself up to that, losing the XG battle every time you lose a game, you're going to find it hard to turn that trend around because of the way you can see goals. But I think I'm still relatively positive, or certainly trying to be positive about Ange. And that's not because it's like I've nailed my colours to the mast. It's just because you can see there is light there, because there has been good performances. And also, like you mentioned Gray there and Bergvall as well. Like the praise that they've been getting is obviously heightened by the context in which they've been playing in. Right, it's like Gray and Bergvall probably haven't been as good as Spurs fans have made them out to be, but we watch them every week being the best players out of a really kind of a rag bag of a team that has been run into the ground, and it's like you can really see the talent there. It's incredibly raw. Like Bergvall maybe on Sunday, like against Liverpool and Newcastle, he was fantastic in those games. Everton on Sunday, where the midfield balance was a little bit off. Sarr again is now injured, kind of like not a great balance in midfield. Gray not playing in midfield as well either. He looked a bit stretched, looked a little bit like an 18-year-old coming up against a more physically dominant team. That's still going to happen, but you can still take... And like Jed Spence, for example, Spurs fans, again, like we've been heaping praise on him because of the job that he's been doing out of position. And he's had games where he's played really well, like against Liverpool in that cup semi-final, played really well. So there is light there. It's really hard to see that at the moment. And I think a lot of the problems are even more compounded by the lack of ambition from the people above Ange to support him through this. And that's been a problem for so long, but it's heightened even more now.
Well, let's transition into that, because I think that's one of the biggest talking points when surrounding Spurs, right? It's Daniel Levy, it's the ownership, it's ENIC, because they've been there a long time now. And if you look at managers over their tenure, there's kind of this same trend. There is a little bit of an upward trajectory. Things can look quite good. Managers don't get backed. I think Pochettino is maybe the prime example of that, where they didn't sign anyone in one of the transfer windows, and then obviously things go downhill, and players eventually might want to move on. You've got your Gareth Bales, you've got your Harry Kanes, and you have to start all over again. And again, the same trajectory keeps on happening. That's one of the biggest criticisms I think I see for the kind of the ownership around Spurs. Every Spurs fan talks about it. I think it's chanted in the grounds all the time about Levy out. One of the things that I think is an interesting point is that sometimes people say that Spurs have spent money. Like obviously in the last 5 seasons, I think it's Chelsea and Manchester United are the big spenders, but then it's Spurs at third place. So like in terms of that side, I guess people's argument, he does spend money, like he does do it. Do you think it's the issue of he doesn't spend it well, and when he does, it's because of his own issues of like sacking a manager, so another manager wants new players? Like, how do you think the ownership how could they be better?
That's definitely part of it. Wages are the biggest thing, because any team in the Premier League can spend £50 million on a player. We've broken our transfer record 3 times since we've moved into the new stadium, but on 2 out of those 3 players, they've been... It's harsh to... last time I was on here, we chatted about Richarlison. It's harsh to call him a dud, because actually we really need him right now, and he has had moments for Spurs, but £60 million, you're not getting that return on investment. And Ndombele, obviously we know about Ndombele. Solanke is our record signing now, and obviously he's injured at the moment, but has really shown...
I've got your last 10 record transfers here, right?
Yeah.
It is Solanke number 1, Ndombele, Richarlison. Then it's Johnson.
Yeah.
Then it's Romero.
Yeah.
Madison. Sanchez. Obviously, remember Sanchez?
Yeah.
Archie Gray, Pedro Porro, Van der Ven. So the majority of them are in this team. Like Spurs traditionally have never really spent like buckets loads of money, have they?
And just had a fair bit of money to spend, definitely. There's been a bit, and that's something that kind of gets thrown at Ange a little bit as well. Saying, because a lot of Spurs fans will say that he hasn't been backed, which you could make the argument that is not necessarily true, and he has been backed. We've bought a lot of players, but also you've got to remember we sold Harry Kane during that time as well, and a lot of that money was reinvested. But the problem is with Spurs is that, like I said, any team in the Premier League can throw their money around. Nottingham Forest are about to maybe spend 50, 60 million pounds on Cunha. Realistically, even last year,
spent 200 million in the summer.
Forest could have Forest didn't anticipate being in this position right now, but they still spent big money. Like they spent 40 million pounds or whatever on Gibbs White a few years ago. Anyone that's worth their salt in the Premier League can chuck their weight around, because you can amortise the transfer fees. That's I don't think that's necessarily always a fair barometer to suggest how ambitious a team is. It's all about wages. There was a stat that came out this morning about the fact that Spurs, and this is the problem, Levy's got nowhere to hide and the board have got nowhere to hide, because there is so much financial transparency in football these days. Like there are so many reports that will come out and basically just, here are your figures. Spurs, I think spend, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think Spurs spend 42% of our revenue on wages, which is nothing compared to Chelsea, Arsenal, despite having far bigger revenues than them in terms of commercial revenue through Rolling Stones playing at the stadium or the NFL and all that kind of stuff. So, and that's where Spurs fans feel like they've been lied to, I think. And I think West Ham fans have gone through a very similar thing about this move to the new stadium. Obviously, West Ham's was far more controversial, I guess, than us because they've up sticks and moved somewhere else, and it's never felt like home. We are still where we are. We're in exactly the same place, but we've just built on top of that. And I think there was this promise, and like Spurs fans, I think gave Levy a bit of a fairer ride when we first moved to the stadium, and maybe not back in Poch. And when we were at Wembley, we didn't sign a player for 18 months because it was like, well, we're building a new stadium, there's costs involved and all that kind of stuff, and loads of debt. That debt is on a very, very fair, spreadable payment plan with the Bank of England. It's not like we're not in loads of debt where we have to like, oh my God, when was the last time Spurs had to sell a player? Look at Man United, for example. Man United's financial position.
Yeah.
When was the last time Spurs had to sell a player?
You've always been really good PSR-wise,
and that's where you have to give Levy his credit. But where Levy doesn't get any, where Levy shouldn't get any credit is that we don't take advantage of that position at the right time. She mentioned about Poch there, and again there is context about the stadium and all that kind of stuff. But Spurs have been in the last few years under Ange, under Conte, under Jose, not so much, but definitely under Conte, Ange, and Poch specifically. We've always been like, if we just get two players, and this is a really, really strong team, strong squad, and it's about the lack of investment at the right times. And the problem is that, we can go and throw £60 million on Solanke, Richarlison and Ndombele, 50 million on Johnson. We don't pay anywhere near enough competitive wages to attract the players that are really going to move the needle. Like Solanke has moved the needle for us 100%, but the reality is that we're 15th in the league. And he was the only big player that we signed in the summer, and we brought in a load of youngsters, which, don't get me wrong, like we just talked about Graham Bergvall and Odebear as well, who actually I think has been more of a miss for us than people have made out, because so much of the time it's actually down to profile as much as anything, and he's got a lot of Premier League experience at a young age. We don't have that kind of winger. We needed to do more in the summer. I think Spurs fans were kind of happy with specifically the players that were brought in, and the fact that we cleared, I think we got about £30 million off the wage bill in the summer. Again, that might be wrong, but we got a lot of players off the wage bill. Højbjerg was gone, Emerson Royal gone, all those kind of players. Got rid of all the deadwood, and there's not much to sell now at Spurs. So, and the problem is, kind of coming back to the Ange thing, is that, like I said, we're 23 days into the window. Every time Spurs lose a game, which is a lot recently, whether it's close, and like Newcastle, for example, a few weeks ago, we were really unlucky in that game. Like, so unlucky. The handball went against us, and we've had a few decisions go against us in recent weeks. But the reality is that we've not been good enough.
Yeah.
But they keep saying the same things after every defeat about, like, we're sticking by him. And it worries me that what they're really doing is kind of saying that to take the blame off of the board, and they're not spending money because they know they're going to sack him at some point. That's what it feels like to me.
Scapegoating him.
Exactly. And they've hung him out to dry massively, regardless of whether you like him or loathe him. As a Spurs fan, like, he's been hung out to dry.
I mean, but whilst we agreed we liked some of the signings, you thought Spurs' more recent signings weren't on the right kind of thinking. That it was too disjointed. One was for now and a bunch were for futures, but they could maybe make a huge impact now.
Well, I think that there's kind of like a mix of them, yeah. Like, I think going in getting Solanke, I think has been excellent, but it felt like you've got Solanke at one end. Like, Solanke is in his peak, approaching the end of his peak. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to stop being good, but you're getting a guy who's like 26, so you're kind of expecting his next 2 years are going to be good, and then the 2 years after that are maybe going to be a little bit less good. And if there's a fifth year on the contract, then it's likely to be a significant downgrade on, 26, 27-year-old. Then you're also going and spending huge money on Archie Gray. Bergvall, I don't think matters, because Bergvall was like so little money that like that's just like a reasonable gamble to make to me.
Yeah.
But it does just kind of feel like you're like the squad's age profile isn't geared towards a particular goal. Like, when you're building the squad, what you want to say is this squad is designed to peak in 2028. We're going to have a bunch of players who then are going to be at peak age. Well, in 2028, someone like Brennan Johnson should be peaking. He'll be like 25, right? But then Solanke will be 29, 30. A bunch of these other guys will be significantly older than that. Like Maddison will be in his 30s. Son presumably will be gone. You've then got these young guys who will still be pre-peak. They'll be like 21.
Yeah.
And a 21-year-old Archie Gray might be really, really good, but he also might be still a 21-year-old versatile player. It depends what he turns into. Presumably he's going to be a DM.
Yeah,
but a 21-year-old DM is still not unlikely to be like one of the best DMs in the league.
Yeah.
So you've got this situation where by the time this player's peaking, that player needs to be replaced. By the time that player's peaking, that player needs to be replaced. This was my issue when Arsenal signed Thomas Partey. You know, I was kind of like, given his age, by the time that Saka, Saliba, Martinelli are hitting their peak years, that guy will need to be replaced, and so it's proved. He's going to go this summer.
Yeah.
No, I don't really want to get into him, but you know what I mean. Like, I just think that there needs to be a theory of like how this team is going to become one of the best in the country, and it can't just be we just sign good players when we like good players. To me now, it should generally be we're going to go and get like 19 to 23 year olds. That's probably the best way to do it, because that way you've got like, you can build a core. There are a bunch of guys who are already in that category already at the club, and you just shouldn't really buy anybody much older unless they're a bargain. You know, like those guys. Like if Spurs went and got like a much older centre back on a short term deal because they need backup, who's not going to be a starter, that to me is like perfectly fine. But don't go and spend big money on anybody who's 26 or over, I think, at this stage, unless they represent an insane deal that cannot be missed. Like, Spurs need to have this attitude of, okay, 2027, we're going to be back in the Champions League. 2028, 29, 30, those are the years we want to compete for Champions League and title. And you just have to build that way, because otherwise you end up in the kind of Man United situation where you're like, buy some guys, manager gets sacked, new manager comes in, says I hate these guys, sell some of those guys, new manager buys a bunch of guys, that manager gets sacked. You go round and round forever, and the age profile of the team just like steadily either gets worse or just turns over. You're not building towards anything. So this is where the club needs to say, whoever's here now, like, we're prepared to go through some pain if need be, though they shouldn't have to, because there's tons of talent in the squad. But the guys who we get in might be slightly pre-peak. You know, they might be 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, rather than the finished product. In that sense, I was a bit on the fence about Solanke, because I really like the player, and I do think he's been excellent. But are Spurs going to win the title this year, next year, or the year after? Probably not, unless they go out and spend a ton of money and get incredible players and it all somehow clicks. To me, they should be thinking, how do we become one of the best teams in the country consistently? And that requires more long-term planning.
Yeah, it's all that this is the bigger frustration, is that I think a lot of what you just said therein lies a lot of the problems on and off the pitch, because in terms of the way that we built the squad, in terms of the age profile, when we've got a few players missing in that team, there are no leaders on that pitch whatsoever, and then that puts more pressure on those 18-year-olds like Graham Bergvall to step up, and that is why Spurs fans have been so glowing in their praise, because of how they've stepped up to the task at hand. Obviously, results won't reflect that, but individual performances, they've been fantastic in context. But you haven't got... There's a big disparity in some of the player ages. There's not many players, and Ange actually said this like a few months ago. It was like, in terms of the next stage of the recruitment, we need to focus on bringing in more guys that are of that kind of pre-peak stage, to almost like help develop those players on the pitch and kind of get them through games, but also to add more proven quality to the squad, because we've done some future planning, but like you said, it is a little bit disjointed in a sense. And also, in terms of that ambition, like you just sort of touched on at the end there, Spurs have it all there to be a title-winning club. It's all there. You've got a really self-sustaining revenue model.
Stadium's amazing. It will always sell out, because even when fans get fed up, which is happening a lot now, there are so many kind of... what Levy has turned Spurs into is, you know, essentially a really good model for tourism. There are so many fans that come over every single game, and like, if I sell my seat for Leicester on Sunday because I've had enough, someone will buy it. And you'll still get 60,000 people for Leicester at home, so you're still making the money. You're then getting even more people that are buying the drinks, buying the pies in the stadium because they're there for a day. So the revenue model is so self-sustainable and so brilliant that there are no excuses for Spurs not to be a title-winning club. And people talk about the mentality a lot of the time of the players and Spursy and all this kind of stuff. You know, the fish rots from the head. That all comes from the board. That lack of ambition is like, because Spurs are, as long as we stay in the Premier League, their kind of guys is like, as long as we stay in the Premier League and the ceiling is top 4, that's fine, because we're still making the same amount of money. Whereas there is no excuse for Spurs not to... I'm not saying Spurs should win a title, because Liverpool exists, Arsenal exists, Man City exists, Chelsea exists. But to not be in those kind of conversations is ridiculous for what we were promised and what we've turned ourselves into. It's just, nothing adds up. Okay. One final thing, I guess, about the current situation before we really get into the how to fix Spurs is the injuries. Obviously, Vicario, Romero, Van der Ven, Udogie, Basuma, Bentancur, Werner, Johnson, Odegaard, and Solanke are all out at the moment.
And
Have I missed
Sarr.
anyone?
You can add Sarr to that
And
as well,
Sarr.
as of
Now,
yesterday.
that is 11 players currently out of the first team squad for Tottenham Hotspur. Is there any blame on Ange for that? Like, I think to a degree we will never 100% know because we're not in the training sessions. You don't see every training session, and I think there is definitely obviously the fixture list that plays a huge part. Lots of teams nowadays are picking up injuries. Is there any quick thoughts on the injury kind of stuff, Ben?
I think it's kind of equal blame on a multitude of factors. Ange's style of play, you're asking for trouble in terms of muscle injuries because of the intensity. High press. Then you add to that a congested fixture list, playing 3 times a week over the course of the last couple of months or so. We didn't have any European football last year, so we still had injuries, but we were able to have more stability. The lack of squad depth, which again is a problem that we didn't address in the summer and still haven't addressed so far this window to get him the help, and the injury situation has got even worse within the last week. We've had, Basuma missed a game at the weekend, Johnson missed a game at the weekend, Solanke and Sarr now. That's 4 players injured in the last week since the Arsenal game.
Jesus.
So the board have not done anything there. The medical team seems like we're so quick to rush players back. Is that also on Ange because he needs the players? Like, there was a Athletic article that came out this morning about Spurs sacking the whole medical team and advertising it on LinkedIn. If you want to apply, I think it's still up there. And it was kind of there was murmurings within the club that there was a kind of a big falling out between Ange and the head of, I think it was maybe the head of medical science.
Okay.
And a lot of it seemed to do with the Chelsea game and Van der Ven coming back too soon, and the plan was for him to only play 60 minutes but Romero then goes off, so he has to play longer, and then Van der Ven gets injured. So it's a bit like everything at Spurs. It's a mess, and you can point the blame in all directions. Yeah, Ange is not blameless in all this. But people will say about the training, because of the intensity of the fixture schedule over recent months, what training have Spurs been actually able to do?
Very true.
So it's not as if, Solanke got injured in training the other day. People straight away, when they hear the first bit of news, go, Ange's too intense. It was an injury. He's picked up potentially, there was rumours yesterday it's an MCL injury, which is 3 months. If that's not true and it's just a knee thing, Ange said it might be a few weeks.
I also heard as well that wasn't it through he had a shot?
He had a shot and he fell. He just
fell.
These things happen.
Yeah.
It's like, there's also an element of just the fact that we've just been incredibly unlucky. Like that stuff like that happening is just, you can't make that up. You're arguably your best player this season alongside Kulusevski, on top of an injury crisis where, fair enough if you want to blame all the muscle injuries on Ange and the rushing players back on that kind of stuff, fair play. But then your striker goes down and it's like... Yeah.
And good squad depth means that these guys don't play as much.
Exactly, that's the biggest factor. And people will say that, just quickly as well, people will say, one of the reasons I think you can blame part of this on Ange is that he had Jed Spence since the start of the season and didn't really use him.
Yes,
players like that he's maybe not used so much, maybe not taking off Romero and Van der Ven in games for 20 minutes. But the problem is that Spurs find it hard to control games, so you're not going to go 3-0 up and take off your centre-back and bring another one on to rest him and slow the game down. So again, that is where Ange's style of play comes into it as well.
Okay, all right, well, let's get into them how to fix. Firstly, let's kick it off with Ange. Are we Ange in or are we Ange out? I think, for me, it is definitely worth keeping him. At least, at the very minimum, at least of the summer. Yeah. I don't see any point in bringing in a Ryan Mason, and there's no manager out there really that I think is going to do a 6 months interim job. It doesn't really happen that much nowadays. And really, if that's the case, that the other option is Ryan Mason for the League Cup semi-final against Liverpool, FA Cups and the rest of the season, Europa League campaign, I think it's a waste. Right, we've seen what Ryan Mason can do. It's not much really at the moment.
Yeah.
He's very much a part of the coaching staff, not necessarily the best manager himself just yet. Maybe there's questions, I think, from the board that say he does lose that semi-final to Liverpool. They do think, okay, let's just do it now. Yeah. But I think it's a very tough market to go and get maybe the ideal managers midway through the season. I think in the summer it becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Pat, are you also Ange in?
I think that if you're going to sack your manager in the middle of the season, you need a really good reason to do it.
Yeah,
it's expensive, and it's also not going to change Spurs' season. Spurs are not going to get relegated. Spurs are not going to get Champions League football. They might win a trophy, But even if you replaced Ange with someone who's better than Ange, you're not going to change your chances of winning a trophy from like 15% to 40%.
Yeah.
You're going to change it maybe from 15% to like 17%. It's really not worth it. It's also money that you just don't need to spend.
Yeah.
Like to sack Ange right now, you'd have to spend some money. You could just go and get like an 8 to 10 million pound like utility defensive player in this window, and that would tide you over a little bit till your guys come back.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and I think Ange kind of deserves help in that way. Like, what we're talking about with injuries compound because obviously people get injured. The guys who aren't injured play in the red zone. Then they get injured because they're in the red zone. Okay, then the other guys come back. Then they're in the red zone because they're having to play all the time, having just come back from injury. They get injured again. Like, this is how it goes. And this idea, look, there are managers, I think, who like maybe have training methods that lead to more injuries. But historically, there are a lot of managers who get praised because their teams don't get injured, and it's pure luck. It's pure luck.
Yeah.
Like Liverpool have been really lucky this season with injuries. Like Manchester City have not been, Arsenal have not been, and Spurs have been much more unlucky even than those teams. So I just don't really care for this attitude at all. And also, a lot of mid-table managers, people will say, well, look, they haven't dropped off, despite their injuries. Like people saying it about Bournemouth right now. Well, Bournemouth strikers are not like world-class players. And the drop-off from them to their backups is not that great. You may even think that their backups are better in some ways. Whereas for Spurs, you can't have like 2 teams worth of £50 million players. Yeah. That is just not possible. So you have to accept that the drop-off from your stars to your backups is going to be pretty significant, even if you like your backups. And in Spurs' case, the backups have been injured too. So I don't know. I keep him for now. I reassess in the summer because look, if somebody's available, the one thing about Ange is I don't think that he's really added a huge amount above the quality of the squad. He does in attack, but he doesn't in defence.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it kind of is about even. And there are managers out there who can add a little bit more, who get teams playing above their talent level. The problem is you don't know who they are. They're vanishingly rare. The ones you do know, you can't get because they're already at clubs and they're really, really expensive. So by all means, in the summer, have a little think. Maybe you look at Thomas Frank, maybe you look at Andoni Iraola. Like, those guys would be quite interesting, both of them, for Spurs. I like both those managers, but I certainly wouldn't get rid of Ange mid-season just so I could do that. I would look around in the summer because you should always look around. Whether he wins a trophy or not, you should look around in the summer.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Ben, I assume you're Ange In?
Yeah, definitely for now. Like I said, nothing changes if we sack Ange.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. Like, the only manager that's being linked that is potentially available right now is Edin Terzic. And if you want a miserable end to the season, then be my guest.
That's one way to guarantee it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But no, I basically agree with everything you guys said. I'm Ange In for now, and then reassess the situation in the summer.
Okay, all right. Well, now we are really getting into it as Ben being the sporting director / Daniel Levy. So Daniel Bowman over there, Ben Levy over there.
We've got our wish, Levy out.
Exactly. Okay, well, let's get into it then. We're going to go into the squad first, and as a group, we're going to decide whether we're keeping or selling, or extending of the contracts as well. I think a lot of these are going to be quite easy, to be honest, and we'll go on from there. Firstly, Vicario. Yeah, absolutely fine. Kinski, absolutely fine. Fraser Forster, his contract's coming to an end this summer.
Yeah, I think he'll be gone.
Let that run out. I think Brandon Austin did a good job where he's fine as a third choice.
Yeah, I think with Austin, it's probably one of those ones where it's great to have a homegrown goalkeeper in your squad that's club trained for Europe. Well, he might not be in Europe next season, so it probably won't matter. But I think I wouldn't. Austin is what it is. I think it's not the end
third
of the
choice. Is he that much worse than Fraser Forster? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Alfie Whiteman, we'll just move on. His contract ends. It is what it is. Christian Romero. 2027 his contract ends. Real Madrid supposedly sniffing around. He supposedly wants out of the rumours. Mr. Sporting Director, what would your thoughts be?
I would try and get him to sign a new contract as soon as possible because I think he is inconsistent at times, but largely criminally underrated and incredibly important to Spurs' backline. We lose, in terms of ball progression, what you lose without Romero in the team, and then you replace it with Dragusin, who is a decent defender, horrible on the ball compared to Romero. But good luck trying to convince him. It's going to be really tough. Would the sensible thing to do be cash in and then reinvest that money by signing another centre-back and maybe giving Van der Ven a new contract? Potentially. I would, as a Spurs fan, I would love to keep Romero because I think we miss so much without him in the side.
Yeah.
but it's going to be a difficult decision because I think it's a funny one with Romero because after the Chelsea game where he got injured, he come out very publicly and backed Ange and kind of fired shots at the board. So he's in a position to do that because he is in a position where he probably wants to leave. But he also wanted to leave under Conte, and then we sacked him. And then
he was happy again.
Yeah, well, I think Romero loves Ange. I think they have a really good relationship with each other, and he's part of our leadership group. And he's a great defender. Again, he'll have bad games. He's one of those players where it's like the ceiling is so high, but the floor can also be so low at times. But I would love to keep him.
Pat? What fee do you think we start thinking about it for him?
So year left?
So he's
2
2 years.
2027.
2.5 now, but in summer 2.
Sorry to shout in your ear.
Depends if you just want to keep him. If you want to keep him, then just price him out of a move or make it so ridiculous. And
Real Madrid don't spend lots of money on these guys.
I don't think anyone is going to spend really over 50 mil on him. We're in a deflationary market now anyway, so we're going to see some fees for these middle players come down. The top end will still stay the top end, but you'll probably see a load of others maybe take a 5 to 15 mil haircut. Mm-hmm. So if you want to price him out of the move, then just say it's 60, and that way you can get a quality replacement and have a little bit of money left over. But I don't know, I just re-up him, just keep him around.
Okay. Romero is staying. Well done, mate. Christian, sorry. Mickey van der Ven staying 100%.
Yeah.
Dragusin, backup, he's fine. I actually don't rate Dragusin, but I think as your third choice, fourth choice centre back in an ideal world, he's okay. Yeah,
that's fine. But I think I would. If the thing is with Dragusin is that there are going to be clubs still sniffing around him, and he's prime for going back to Italian football. If we had Dragusin under Conte or Mourinho, he'd be much better. Box defender, that's kind of your job. But if we're living in a world where Ange is still the manager, or for example and also kind of foreshadowing it to a potential replacement for Ange, Spurs have to go and bring in another progressive manager that is going to want to play attacking football. That has to happen because of what Ange has done with this squad. He's tuned them this way. And also, if you're a big club, you have to have those kind of ambitions to play on the front foot and control games. So, say, for example, Iraola is the next Spurs manager, which we'll talk about. But you still have to have centre-backs that are very good on the ball. And in that situation, it doesn't work either. So I think try and get some decent money for him because I think there will be clubs that pay it. I think he was linked with Napoli. I mean, his agent said that, basically tried to say that we're using Spurs as a stepping stone to get to Real Madrid.
Bayern were after him, weren't they?
Yeah. I also don't really trust Bayern when it comes to buying centre-backs and what they've done with Upamecano. And
true.
So maybe we should have seen the signs then, but...
Okay, so you're willing to sell him if an offer comes in?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we'll see. We'll go back to that then. Maybe when we get to the transfer section. Ben Davies' contract ends in 2025 this summer. Let that run out.
There's been rumours that they are going to... It's almost like what happened with Son, where he's got a +1 in the contract, and that might... I think Ben Davies will probably stay, but if he wants to...
If he wants to be the last choice, fine.
Doesn't affect us having him around, so I wouldn't be that bothered about it.
What about these guys whose contracts are running out, though? Who have we got running out? We've got... See, to me, the interesting ones here, Forster, Whiteman, Davies, Reguilon, all this year, whatever. But what interests me are these 2026 ones.
Yeah.
So we've got Bissouma, Bentancur, and Son all out of contract in 2026.
Yeah.
What are you doing with those guys? Because they are regularly used first-team players.
I think Son, same as Ben Davies, we just activated the
which
plus
put
one
him to
option.
2026.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he will be here next season.
Yeah.
And I think maybe he goes on a
free. Do we try and get him a longer contract, do you think?
No.
All three of them, you don't give him a longer contract?
Son, no. Basuma or Bentancur, I think one of them should move on in the summer to refresh those midfield options. Basuma, it's really difficult because...
Spurs fans don't like him.
Yeah, but it's one of those ones... Most Spurs fans don't like him, and he is incredibly infuriating sometimes because, again...
stupid decisions sometimes, isn't
he? Again, you think back to the games that he's had against... I mean, in the North London derby this year away, he was terrible last week and got hooked at half-time. Think back to the North London derby last year at the Emirates. He was unbelievable. Ceiling is so high, floor is so low. He's so inconsistent. Part of that comes with the incredibly taxing nature of playing as a 6 in this system, which exposes him. So you have to give him that credit, I think. But when it comes to the individual decision making, that's when you go, regardless of whether you are stretched in the system or not, that's not good enough. Chelsea game, for example, that penalty, ridiculous decision to dive in like that. That's happened too many times. The second yellow card for the dive against Luton, those kind of things. Which if that happened, those things can happen sometimes.
Any player can do it.
Exactly. It's too often.
Frequently.
So I think Bentancur, again, if you're going to think about changing manager, that still might play.
He's a year younger, Bentancur. He's 27,
younger,
but
probably
28.
more consistent. If you're going to move to a manager that plays 4-2-3-1 with more of a double pivot setup and doesn't rely on a 6, Bentancur I think would be a great option.
Yeah,
it showed that under Conte, where you play like it was a 3 at the back, but you're playing Højbjerg and Bentancur in midfield.
He's much more consistent than Basuma as well, at least. I think.
Yeah, and he will get exposed in that 6 as well because neither of them are 6s. But if like gun to my head, if you had to keep one of them, I just think for the consistency and the it'd be
you only spent
Bentancur.
like 20 something million on Basuma, didn't you?
Yeah, and Bentancur was cheaper.
Okay.
I think Basuma was about 25. Also, there were rumours, again, don't know how reliable, that Spurs are looking to offer Bentancur a new contract, but I don't. That came out literally yesterday, and it could be just tier 5 journalism.
I think I'd rather you offer. You'd rather Bentancur get a new contract, I think, than Basuma.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, though his availability does suck.
Yeah.
He gets injured a lot.
He gets injured a lot.
He also
Yeah,
gets
he's
banned
one of the
for
most
doing-
unlucky players I think I've ever known. With the injuries.
Well, with the injuries, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
The other side,
just
maybe
be
less clear.
clear,
That was just him
with
being,
the injuries.
An idiot. Okay, the rest I think it is all pretty much an agreement to keep, maybe. So Sarr, I think you keep 100%.
Yeah.
Bergvall, you keep 100%. Madders, you keep. Kulusevski, keep without a doubt. I always think Kulusevski's so much older than he is. He's only 24.
Yeah,
Every time I think he's like 27 or
I
28.
think he's the one that Spurs should be like. Obviously, there's a chat about Romero pushing for a move. Good luck. Right now, good luck trying to get Kulusevski to sign a new contract. Obviously, he's under contract. He's got a good
2028. So you got a couple of years on him.
So Spurs can again, like you said, price him out of a move.
But if someone goes, here's 70 million for Kulusevski.
I would be incredibly worried that the club would
Take that. Yeah.
I would not take that.
Yeah. But you're the sport director here,
So
mate. You're taking it.
I'm not taking it.
Okay, perfect. Son, happy to let the deal run out in 2026.
Yep.
Perfect. Mikey Moore, his deal runs out in 2027, but do we send him on loan next season?
That's a no. I would keep him around.
him.
It's a weird one with his contract. I don't know where. I think the time he was able to sign for was limited because of his age.
Yes,
he's
that
18.
is true. That is
So
true.
it's not necessarily he will.
You can't do those 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah,
deals,
he'll
can
get a
you?
big.
He'll get a big boy contract.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Brennan Johnson, keep. Odebert, keep. Min Hyung Yang, keep. He's obviously just joined in. Interested to see what he's like. Solanke, keep staying. Richarlison is 2027. We selling
Years
Richarlison?
You've got to sell him if you get a decent offer.
100%. Yeah, we said this last time. I think we was on. Love him. Really want it to work out.
Yeah.
Can't keep saying that all the same time. Scored at the weekend, to be fair, and to be fair, put in a good shift coming off the bench for someone who clearly wasn't fit to start the game.
Yeah.
So fair play to him, and he constantly endears himself to the fans with his words and his work rate. Mm-hmm. But I think again, going into next season, if Ange stays or Ange doesn't, again, because in an ideal world, you bring in another manager that's going to play with intensity, high press, etc., like we spoke about Areola, you're going to want to rest Solanke. So you need your backup to be available. It's the cringe cliche, availability is the best ability.
Yeah.
If your backup striker's not available, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I feel sorry for him. Don't get me wrong, I feel really sorry for him, but good bid comes in, cash in. 100%.
What is good bid? Would you take 15
we
mil?
spent 60. 15?
Yeah, genuinely. Think about this market now. Like, who's buying an injury-prone striker?
Yeah, it's a
Like,
good point.
if Everton go, it's 15 million.
The only market that I think that would spend much bigger money on him is Saudi, but he has said
no.
sometimes he doesn't want to go. So I think I probably would take 20.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, well, let's say in this imaginary world, we're getting 17.5 for Richarlison,
Yep.
right? 17.5 million. Did we agree to sell Basuma in the summer?
Yeah.
Okay, so Basuma
15, 20.
15 mil. So what we're saying there, let's say 32.5.
I just call it 30 between
30
Basuma
between
and Richarlison.
5
Yeah,
on me.
yeah.
And then Romero. Would you accept a £45 million bid, Mr. Sporting Director?
No.
Okay, so Romero stays.
Yeah, Romero
stays. There we go then. Okay, so we've got 30 million as well added to our probably summer budget because the guys are going to leave in the summer.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into the transfers, me and Pat are both going to offer a manager if, say, Ange does go and you as Sporting Director can accept which one. Pat, I'll let you go first because I'm happy to do
I think we've
either
got
or.
the same two names.
They're obviously the ones being spoken about.
Yeah.
And they're the ones we both love at the moment.
And like rightly so. Like I think they're both good fits. I'm going to talk about Thomas Frank.
Go crazy.
Because I do think that Iraola, like he's an obvious name right now, and I think a lot of Spurs fans will want him because he's overperforming with Bournemouth. And I think that there's a belief that like we'll do the Pochettino thing
Exactly.
again.
Poch 2.0 is
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
He also does look like he could be very special.
Do you know, so many
No, I
other-
think he is very special, but
Yeah.
I also think that like there's a feeling sometimes of like he's the shiny new thing.
Yeah,
true.
okay.
And Frank just sitting there. Like, give me a chance.
And
Toy in the corner. I've had him for 5 years.
Yeah.
yeah, so well, and the thing about Frank is like if you think that Ange is too kind of like one note, if you think he only plays a certain way,
Yeah, very good
Frank
point.
is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
You know, like we've seen Frank this season when Brentford play at home, no matter who they play against, but especially when they play against weaker sides, they're incredibly aggressive. Like the press is ferocious. They score goals relentlessly. They basically play end to end and say that we bank on our players getting better chances and finishing them than you can create against us. And it's worked for them generally
Yeah,
at
definitely.
home. They've been horrible to play against there. They were really, really good against City. Like really the only two teams, like I thought that Forest were kind of lucky there. The only two teams who've really kind of dominated them there have been Arsenal and Liverpool, which is like fair enough. They have a massive talent advantage on Brentford.
Yeah.
And Brentford have injuries as well. So I like that. I also like that he can play like a sort of deep block or a mid block, like defensive football. I like that both of these guys can make more of their talent than you would expect. Because with Brentford, when people talk about Tony going, they were like, well, when Tony goes, they're in serious
Yeah,
trouble.
yeah.
And now they're like, well, if Mbeumo gets injured, then they're in
If
serious
Visser
trouble.
goes.
Yeah.
You know, they say this all the time, but like these guys do get injured and they always find a way to get just enough out of the attack. Despite the fact that I think there's been a real talent drain there over the last few years. And if I were Thomas Frank, I'd be like ready to leave because of that. But, you know, they do have these single points of failure. Like they do have, what happens if Mbeumo goes down? What happens if Norgard goes down? There are these places all over the squad. And the fact that he's managed to keep them performing at a pretty decent level, I think. They've always looked better than their position in the table. It really speaks well of him as a manager. Plus, I think he's got a lot of soft skills that are very valuable. He's an incredibly good communicator. He's a really persuasive speaker. With the press, he's capable of being prickly and saying, like, that's a stupid question and shutting them down, or diffusing things by laughing with them. I think that is such an underrated quality in a big club manager.
And just struggled a little bit with that.
Yeah.
But Ange has also, I think the press have kind of seen with Ange that he's getting annoyed and they know how to poke him. And it frustrates him. And I can understand it frustrating him because, you know, you've got these idiots who like write for the Mail or whatever who literally don't know the first thing about football because they're fucking simpletons. Like, and they say to him, they're just like, oh, do you not think that like maybe you should try like some different tactical stuff? And if I were Ange, I'd be like, bro, I've managed in like 5 countries. Like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like you can't even spell Atletico Madrid. Like, calm down. Like, so that would irritate me if I were Ange too. But yeah, it has been a bit of a struggle for him, and probably as well the fact he's had to take some bullets for the club is also like rankling a bit. The injustice of that. Thomas Frank has never complained about the talent drain at Brentford ever, and I think if he went to Spurs, he would be delighted to be there. And he would be realistic. You know, he'd let the fans know this is what the expectation is. But maybe you could argue the one knock on Frank, I think, is that you could say he's not probably a superstar. You know, maybe he's not a superstar. And also you could say, well, we don't know what he'd look like playing really, really positive football week in, week out.
Yeah.
But we have seen him do it.
Yeah.
So I can understand that. But on the other hand, the floor on him is very, very high. Like, Frank is always going to have your team looking competent. Always. And he's not wedded ideologically to a particular style. I think that that's broadly a good thing. I just think he's a really, really good manager. I think he deserves a good move. I think Spurs is the right level. And I think you'd actually see really good development of some of the young players as well.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the cornerstone of Spurs' success. Plus, the other thing about him, actually, just last thing about him, is there are lots of managers who come in, and actually Spurs have made a habit of hiring some of these guys in recent years who really, really object to other people interfering in their team, the way they see it. So they object to people...
Set piece coach.
And not just set piece coaches, but, you know, like Conte and Mourinho wanted more control over transfers.
Yes.
And so did Pochettino towards the end as well,
Yeah.
which was understandable given his success. But still, they really objected to other people getting involved. Frank's not like that. Frank's known to be very open to learning. He's really interested in hearing from anybody who he thinks has a good idea. He obviously works with a sophisticated analytics setup. He obviously works with sophisticated set piece guys. Him being open to all these like small areas, these marginal gains, that can be the difference between Spurs getting, 6th place in one season and getting 5th or 4th place in Champions League football. And it can certainly be the difference between coming second and winning a title. So those sorts of things, I think there needs to be a culture of that. And to be honest with you, I do think that this all needs to be, any managerial hire also needs to be paired with like a significant overhaul of like the way the club operates.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is something that
Daniel
Ange
Levy's
has
hands out
tried.
of it.
Like Ange has tried that. He's been the one that's kind of, there's so much talk about winning mentality at Tottenham. Like Ange has tried to dispel all of these. He's not bought into it. He's kind of butted against a lot of that stuff. And I think Frank would be quite similar. This is why I think that, I don't know, I'm presumably probably going to speak about Iraola. Like, I think Frank and Iraola would be two good options because I think both of them can pick up on a lot of stuff that Ange has done. A lot of Spurs fans.
You're not
said,
starting scratch again, are you?
exactly. Like, I think a lot of Spurs fans, regardless of their position and whether they wanted to stay or not, could probably accept that. All right, I think Ange is a good guy before the guy. I think, like, as much as we want him to be the guy, and I'm desperate for him to be the guy because of all the stuff around him. Like, you want to win playing that way and stuff like that, and we've seen really good highs. But I think for those reasons, what you said about Frank in terms of and I presume what you're going to say about Iraola in terms of taking on from that, I think Ange's done quite a lot of good groundwork.
Yeah.
That it wouldn't be a hard transition whatsoever.
And he had to do a lot of groundwork as well.
Yeah.
Like that Conte squad, and obviously the way
a
Spurs
mess.
were playing under Conte was
he's
a
got
very
completely defensive
different way.
football to completely aggressive football.
And he did that in a year, really. Like he's done a very, very good job on that. And I'm sure Spurs fans would remember that if he was to move on.
Yeah.
I completely agree as well. Like, my other option was Thomas Frank. I think it's either of these two guys, especially as well when you look at the kind of available managers out there at the moment, like it's Eric Ten Hag, Xavi, Allegri, Terzic, Roger Schmidt.
We
Igor
interviewed
Tudor.
Ten Hag before.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Sarri. These two are obviously the way above all of them. I do think with both of them, though, they are in clubs right now where the board is fantastic for them. The recruitment is fantastic for them. I wonder if they would be very careful about it. Having looked at every manager under, say, Levy, and like I was thinking this about Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank loves the way Brentford do their things and help them out all the time when they can. And even though since Iraola's been at Bournemouth, like the recruitment has been unbelievably good.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether they both would go, okay, Levy is sacking a manager every 18 months and not helping them out.
Yeah.
That's a really big worry. I guess under the ownership of Ben Levy, things might be slightly different.
Yeah, I'll give you exactly what you want.
But yeah, Iraola's my suggestion. He's obviously got a year less than Thomas Frank at Brentford. Thomas Frank has 2027. Iraola's actually 2026. So come the summer, he's only got a year left on his deal with Bournemouth.
Yeah.
So in terms of fees and things like this, it might not cost too much in order to get Iraola. He obviously this year has been very, very impressive.
Yeah.
He's doing things, and obviously most recently against Newcastle when the whole bench is academy kids and his two strikers are all out injured, and he's got Ouattara playing up front, doing very, very well. I think he's right, and I think both players do this. Both managers do this, but they will take your average player and take them to the next level.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be very, very interested to see what, say, like Mikey Moore will look like under either of these managers and how they improve. But equally, I'd be very, very interested to see how James Maddison would improve with these guys. Iraola knows, obviously, Solanke very, very well. I wonder if Iraola has a word, if he moves to the club, he has a word with Kirkes and goes, hold on a second, like maybe before you sign the contract with Liverpool, maybe you come fight for the position under Udogie. But again, I think the squad, he would look at that squad and think Udogie, a great guy I can use. There are players there that I'd be happy with. I do think with Iraola, you have to do more to the squad than you do with Thomas Frank.
Probably.
I think Iraola would be after a couple more players than Thomas Frank would be after.
Certainly, I think in attack, because I think one thing you mentioned about Bournemouth and one thing that Iraola's done so well with the problem solving is obviously with both strikers out, they've recruited in a way where they've got so many versatile players across that front line that people will say about they've lost it now, and Evan Nilsson's been really good.
Yeah,
he's not scored loads of goals, but he's been a really good foil for that attacking team. Yeah, exactly, literally the perfect word for it. But Semenyo can play up there, Kluivert can play there, Ouattara can play there if they need to. Obviously Brooks can't, but they can be really fluid in that attack. And I think what you said about both of the managers, to be fair, but Iraola gets so many comparisons to Poch because one, it all feels aesthetically a little bit like Poch.
Yeah.
So many even non-Spurs fans say that he just looks like a Spurs manager. I think because he's got a similar story to Poch in terms of Southampton got them pushing for Europe and stuff like that, raising the floor of average players making
recently
really good
was
players.
a player as well.
Exactly. Like there's so many kind of comparisons there. So I think
he's harder to get though. I think
it's gonna
Iraola's
be-
harder to get.
I think it's been really hard to. I made a video about this literally straight after the full-time whistle on Sunday because naturally, when you're 3-0 down at half-time to Everton, all the chat turns to who's going to be the next manager. If anyone thinks that right now we're going to get Iraola to come in, that is delusional.
Yeah.
Even in the summer, potentially. Like I think
if he gets European football with,
if he gets, they will.
Bournemouth.
Like you said, he's got 1 year left on his deal. He'll sign a new contract. He'll take them into, even if it's Conference League. I think he will take them into it. I'm sure he will because he feels like the owners, regardless of how much money you spend, and they've spent decent money. Bournemouth's owners are, rich. We know that. It's about the feeling of being backed, and they've done the right things for me. Frank is exactly the same, like you said. They might not have spent a load of money, but you've got me the players that I need. You've everything that I've kind of asked for. You've done for me, and we're in a position now where we're reaping the rewards of that. Bournemouth's owner came out and said that our aim is to get in the. Did he say it last year? It was
it was
we want to
European,
push for
European
Europe.
places,
And they've done that. And obviously he struggled at the start. I think it's going to be... Iraola would be... I would like either manager if Ange goes. I would get behind both of them. I think both of them have got their faults, but I think... One of the faults I think of Iraola potentially is that, like you kind of mentioned earlier, Pat, about like, if any new manager comes in, they're not going to take... Spurs aren't going to all of a sudden go, it's all back and we're going to finish 7th or 6th and really salvage the season and maybe win one of the cups. It will still be stumbling over the line to the end of the season. And Iraola's game a lot of the time kind of relies on more chaos, which is almost quite like Ange. Frank is a lot more...
Calm.
There's probably more structure, I'd say. That's probably a basic way of looking at it. But I think Iraola, again, with the pressing, they leave gaps. They're very, very intense. Like, you could still have similar issues at Spurs under Iraola towards the end of the season. But give him a pre-season, I think you'd see... consistent Spurs next year. Also, I think with Iraola, again, it's going to be one of those things where they've got a lot of injuries at the moment. If they were in Europe next year, would they fall off a little bit as well? And does his stock then
playing more football?
And then he makes the move maybe to Spurs. So I would be happy with either of them. I think the thing that really excites me about Frank, I think Iraola would probably be my preferred option, just because I think I like the way he plays and I really like what he's doing at the moment.
There's the possibility of being a superstar there, isn't there?
100%. Frank, maybe not so much, but I like what you were saying earlier as well about like the dressing room environment, that ability to... Like, Ange, I think, is a really good communicator and great orator. I think Frank is like... When you see those dressing room speeches like after the game and stuff like that, I know it's kind of like... Those are the things that, as a fan, you think, wow,
you love him.
I'm so proud to have him as our manager. So, and tactically, I think he's super, super flexible. I think there's this narrative around Brentford that they kind of play the same way, like you said, against everyone. That's just not true.
The other thing I think as well between the two, I think Iraola... Like, there's obviously, Pep signed that 2-year deal, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of things maybe City will have a look around him. But like, say he does sign a year extension after Bournemouth. And then there's a perfect route for him to go to Man City. Maybe. I think with Thomas Frank, if Spurs came after him, he'd look at that job as a like perfect thing for me. As in like club level wise. Like I don't think Frank's sitting there thinking like I'm going to go to Man City after Pep Guardiola or anything like that. Whereas I think Spurs is a level where he thinks is the right level.
I think Iraola would as well, but it kind of comes back to the same problem as just like you referred to it. And like I said, I made a video about it straight after the game on Sunday. Like, what manager is going to want to come under this? Obviously, we're under the ownership of me right now, but under Levy, they're going to see manager after manager after manager see, okay, right, Spurs is, again, like I said earlier, Spurs have got all of the fundamentals to be a really successful club. Yeah. And I can have an impact on that as a manager, but you are going to be asking me to overachieve just like Pochettino did. There'll be more investment than there was under Poch, because like we said earlier with the stadium and stuff, that Poch was a bit unlucky with that kind of stuff at points. But it's one of those things where if they wanted to, they would. That's the thing with Spurs, and I don't think there's that much pressure with Tottenham, and I think that's where managers will come and look at it and go, right, what am I actually going to get? When times get tough, what am I going to get? Am I going to get what I asked for? Am I going to get all of the tools necessarily to compete in the way that you keep telling the fans that you want to, but in the boardroom you're saying, as long as we compete for Europe and stay in the Premier League and maybe win a trophy, then that's fine. So Iraola, he's probably more likely to get backed and see more success at Bournemouth.
Genuinely.
And that's a mental thing to say as a Spurs fan, and it's quite embarrassing. Like, no disrespect to Bournemouth. I don't mean anything bad by it towards them whatsoever, but that's embarrassing from a Spurs fan to say that, and it shouldn't be.
But so between the two, you're going to take Iraola.
I would probably edge it towards Iraola, but
and in real life, what do you think would happen?
I think it'd be more likely to be Frank. Yeah.
And if it was those three or those two or Poch, what happened?
Bring Dad back. I'll take back everything I said about him being a snake going to Chelsea. I'm kind of always of the opinion that
Don't go back.
don't go back,
Yeah.
but also, yeah, I think he was the one that kind of galvanised absolutely. I think I probably wouldn't do that, but
I don't think the squad's also.
put it this way: like 2 years ago, when before he went to Chelsea, before
Yeah,
he put
he was
in
close,
Ange,
wasn't
when there were
he?
rumours, I would bit your hand off for it,
Really?
100%. But I think maybe times have changed a little bit, and I think we just need to.
He's also he's going to be at the USA till after the World Cup, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then. Also, in real life, it's going to be Xavi.
Of
Okay,
course.
let's get into these transfers then very, very quickly and talk about a few players. Let's first start off with the January transfer window. I'm going to go through mine first. Pat, you then suggest yours, and then you, Ben, can pick which of them.
Yep.
Now, we assigned 100 million to the January transfer window, then we assigned 200 million in the summer transfer window. Again, with this being Spurs, does it actually happen? Who knows? But for the fun of it, that's what we're doing.
Yep.
We've also then raised about 30 million through sales, so we can kind of throw that into the summer, I think, because we won't sell them until the summer. So 100 million in the transfer window. We've got 10 days to use it in. My three players. Patrick Udogie, obviously, he's been spoken about loads at the moment. Obviously, this young left wing back, very, very exciting. Again, kind of we mentioned about Iraola being one of the shiny toys. He's obviously one of the shiny toys for the left wing back at the moment.
Yep.
Man United are after him. Supposedly, £35 million is what will do it. Gives competition as well between him and Udogie.
Yep.
That's really, really good. Allows Spence to kind of be the right back as well. Really, really good. My other one, Cherki. He's 15 million quid.
No, bad idea.
And he's 15 million quid, and I know there is a lot of talk about him, personality, behind the scenes, and that is definitely questionable. But when I saw the text, everyone saw the text that went out about from the owner of Lyon, text store, and he said it was actually more about his entourage and not himself. It's a lot more to do with the people he's with. So I wonder if he goes to Tottenham Hotspur, he's playing in front of 60,000. Obviously, Lyon is a huge club, but it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. It's much, much more of a mess than, say, Spurs is. I wonder if he kind of maybe calms down a bit, because the player himself is exceptional.
Unbelievable.
He's a
talent,
fantastic player. And for £15 million, I think it's worth a punt. Genuinely, I think it's worth a punt. And then my other one for January is Fikayo Tomori. Now, he has just rejected Juventus. Obviously, Constance's given him his starting place back in AC Milan. So maybe a little bit tougher than it was to get him a couple of weeks ago. Villa are also looking at him. But around 30 million quid is what's being asked. Maybe you have to go a little bit over that. So I've given you there, what's that? 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 80 million pounds worth of spending. There's 20 million there to kind of play around with if we do have to go a little bit further up. Yep. But those are my three suggestions for the last 10 days of the transfer window. Patrick van Straten, your January ones. Go.
Let's go.
I actually haven't broken it down that way.
Okay.
Because I think that the thing for Spurs is getting the right players. And I think whether you can get... You should try and get somebody in January. But if you can't, I don't really care that much. Okay. Again, I don't think it radically changes the season. So I've got two centre-backs, one who can play left-back. I've got DM, and I've got a versatile forward. And to me, that's broadly like what Spurs need.
Yeah, I agree.
So the centre-back who can play left-back, I think you try and go for Jorel Hato at Ajax. I don't know if you get him. That's obviously the biggest risk, but I think you'd be silly not to go for him. I also didn't really think Arsenal would get Timber when they went for him, because I thought he'd say, but I won't be a starter. You've got a nailed-on team, and actually there are tons of minutes. The football is now incredibly fixture congested. So I think Hato, he's been playing left back. He's been excellent. He's a fantastic passer. He's super athletic. He can also play as a centre back. He also will know Van der Ven from the national team setup. This is very useful. He can rival Udogie. He can also cover Van der Ven. And he's got potential kind of world beater possibilities, I guess. Yeah. I think you probably get him for 40 to 50 mil, which is kind of what Arsenal paid for Timber. I think that's fine. Another centre-back is Antonio Silva. So Antonio Silva, everybody I've spoken to who kind of knows about this seems to say that he's one of the best centre-back prospects that they've ever seen. And when you watch him, he is highly impressive. He can cover a lot of ground in a high line. That is absolutely something that you're going to need, whether with Ange or with someone like Iraola.
Yep.
He's an amazing passer. an amazing passer, even with the kind of advantages we see from players playing at Benfica, because he was an amazing passer at Benfica at 18, and at 19 he was a nailed-on starter for them as a centre-back, which is pretty impressive stuff. He's 6'2", he's athletic, he's right-footed, he's already got coming up to 20 appearances in the Champions League as well, which is pretty good. Like, he plays tons and tons of long balls very, very accurately. I do think that would really help Spurs in their build-up play. It will take a lot of pressure off the defensive midfield as well, which they definitely need. Plus, he will help you control games. When games become chaotic, but you're 2-0 up, you need to have a way to slow everything down, to like draw the sting out of the match. Yeah. And having guys like this who are calm under pressure, who cannot get kind of beaten for pace very easily, and who can spray passes over the top as other teams push up at you, I think is very, very useful. He's really good in the air. He's good in the challenge. He could also, I think, play, if you wanted to play a back three, you could use him on the right side of a back three, and Romero could be in the middle of it, which actually obviously is the position he was playing when Spurs got excited about him and decided to pay 55 mil, whatever it is for him. His contract's up in 2 years. He's got a 100 million euro buyout. I think the Portuguese clubs have become a bit more realistic about negotiating with these. João Neves obviously went for like half his buyout. Yeah. I think probably you could get him for maybe 60. If you could get him for less than that, I think that'd be great. If it was a little bit more, I kind of still think that's okay because he's 21. He's a guy I'd go for there. Should I go on to my others?
You go through all of yours and I'll go through all of mine. Yeah, why not?
Okay, DM. So DM, I think you want someone 4 to 5 years older than Archie Gray. You want somebody who can play now but doesn't completely block that pathway for him forever, So I'm looking at a kind of 23-year-old here. I really like Bergvall, but Bergvall is not this. Like Bergvall, when Bergvall looks good, he kind of looks good in the way that Sarr looks good, which is driving through space in central midfield. So again, what I want here is somebody who can defend, who can screen the back line, who is a safe passer, who can be a bit more of a game controller. That is absolutely the profile that Spurs need. Almost more than anything else, they need this one guy who can control the game, because it just doesn't work as it currently is. And sometimes I look at them and I'm like, if you just dropped, look, obviously like Declan Rice costs 100 mil, but if you dropped Declan Rice in this team, how good do you think they would look? I think they'd be incredible. And it doesn't even need to be a player of that level. It could be like a 50-60 million pound player. I think they would look so much better. So I think safe possession guys are generally something they need to cover, but Agume at Sevilla is a guy who I'm interested in. Luciano Agume. He's 22, he's 23 next month. He's a really good passer. His pass accuracy looks a little bit lower than you would expect at the moment. Like, it's only in the kind of mid-80s, but that's because he's actually doing a lot of the progressive passing. Yep. So he has that ability, but he can also play. He was a safer passer when he was young at like Spezia and Inter. And he's a guy who, despite being 22, has already played in La Liga, Liga, and Serie A. Which is kind of interesting. He's really good defensively, loads of defensive actions and really high tackle success in those challenges in a real league, right? Quite press resistant too. Yeah. He's completing about a dribble a game at 85% accuracy, which is kind of bananas. So just having a guy who can wriggle out of a bit of pressure and play a simple pass forward, and there are always options in Ange Ball. Like, you have to say that for him. There are always guys for you to pass to around you. Yeah. Mops up loads of loose balls. He's 6'1", good in the air. Like, I just like this player. I don't think he costs an arm and a leg because he's from Sevilla. I think that I'm saying like 45 mil.
Yeah,
like
I think get less.
I think that's probably the area here. So what? We're up to 150-ish. And then my last one is a versatile forward. So there's Magnus Akliush at Monaco. So he's 22, he's 23 next month. He's playing Champions League football right now. He's playing for a really aggressive, high-pressing team with Adi Hutter. So I think that's a really nice fit for Ange Ball. I think it's a really nice fit for Iraola Ball. Yeah. And I think that what they really need is actually very similar to what Arsenal need. You need someone who can create off take-ons. So what you were saying before about Odobert, like, one of the good things about him is he's a one-on-one threat. Yeah. Nobody else in the team is.
No.
Not a single person. Like, Brennan Johnson is a push-and-go guy. Son at this time in his career can't do it. Solanke's a centre-forward. Kulusevski can carry the ball, but he's not really a skin a couple of guys and accelerate
really
away.
To slow it down to get past his man, yeah.
He's an athlete in the sense that he's like big and powerful and has got loads of stamina. Not that he's super, super quick. So to me, yeah, true. Like, but obviously Rayan Cherki, huge dickhead. Like maybe
You'll fix him, Ben. You'll fix him,
I'll
mate.
fix it. I can change you.
I don't know about Mikey Moore as well. I don't really know what kind of player he is. So like who knows what he turns into?
Mikey's more of like he's a creative winger.
Okay.
Kind of he could play. I think with Mikey, like you see his future playing off the left, but definitely drifting into those kind of half spaces.
Okay.
Playing as a 10. Like he's again a little bit like Odebear. Like he can take on people 1v1, but like he's crossing as you saw for the goal for Richarlison on Sunday. He's kind of crossing from out wide.
Yeah, it's a great cross.
His ability to be progressing, but like the problem is like you mentioned there with Johnson and Son. One of the biggest problems with Spurs have is we play them at the same time all the time as well, and you just can't have. You have to have that variance in your winger profiles on the pitch at the same time. But you can't have two players that just want to do the same thing, especially when one of them is 32.
Yeah, those Son's creative numbers have gone up a little bit this season because he's like a smart player, but I do think Son kind of has to age into probably your backup centre forward.
Yes,
like realistically.
yeah.
But Akliouche, you know, he really pops for chances created off take-ons, and he's at like 0.55 expected goals and assists per 90 this season, which is really impressive. He dribbles a lot, a couple of dribbles a game, carries into the penalty area. Really good defensive intensity, which obviously we like. He has this trifecta of excellent progressive carrying, passing, and receiving. So he can get free as an outlet, he can drive upfield with the ball, and he can pick out a man. So this is a guy who I think can potentially... Maddison's 28. This is a guy who can be your Maddison replacement. But if you wanted to play him on the wing right now, you could do that. You can kind of play him all over the place. And I think that's kind of what Spurs need. Decent shot selection too. Like he gets a decent number of shots, but he's not like having a pop from 25 yards. On average, his shots are inside the area. His shot quality is slightly above league average. So for a guy to be getting decent numbers of shots that are also good shots, very, very good. Like I think probably, you know, Monaco are open to selling, generally speaking. I think maybe another 50 mil here. And I think that if you had these guys, you've then bought a 21-year-old, a 22/23-year-old, a 22/23-year-old, and a kid, like a 18, 19-year-old. To me, that then means that I'm looking at like 4 years' time. This team is like ready to go, bolstered by Brennan Johnson. You know, you still got Van der Ven, all these people. That to me is the core of a really, really good side. And I think all of those, maybe Antonio Silva has bigger ideas for himself. Maybe Hato has bigger ideas for himself. But I think all those guys are completely gettable for a team like Spurs.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll go through my final ones then. And, you know, we haven't got a lot of time just because the freelancers opens in like 2 minutes. So we'll blast through really quickly. So Tyler Dibbling, I think someone, obviously a lot of clubs are looking at him at the moment. That right wing can play striker if needed. Southampton are quoting as like, if you want him now, 55 million. But I think Southampton get relegated. Next year, he's going for 20 mil, 25 mil.
Yep.
Like you can get him at a good cost there. I think he becomes a lot more interesting. And he deserves to be playing in the Premier League. Like he's an exceptional talent, looks exceptional. So that changes. Maybe push it to 35, depending on what happens. Spurs are obsessed with Eze. They're obsessed with Eze. I don't think this fits the profile of wanting to go young, but I thought it's worth mentioning because I know Spurs have always kept an eye on him. But I think if you're going to have, say you're going to get in a Cherki or something like this, you can't have Cherki, Maddison and Eze. It's not going to work.
Yeah,
like
I also don't think you can have Maddison, Eze and Kulusevski either.
You know what?
It's hard, yeah.
Very, very true. In terms of the six, I don't know if he'll go to Spurs. But Carlos Baleba, who would cost you an arm and a leg, he'll shore up that DM position for years.
200 mil got.
Yeah,
It's 100 million, yes.
Yeah.
My kind of more cheaper option is Andrew Stiller, obviously doing very well in the Bundesliga. £33 million, that's looking at the cost of being to get him. Liverpool looking at him, obviously. Super, super interesting. A guy that is not super old, but he's 23. We're talking about like the Archie Gray being in that position. Like those two can have a really nice blend together. Your other centre back, obviously I pitched Tomori as well. Hincapié by Leverkusen. He does look expensive, 60-odd million pounds, but this is a guy who can play in a 3 at the back when you need him to, can play in a 4 at the back, left-footed, does a very, very good job. And my young forward, who is versatile to play on the left wing as well, we spoke about him a little bit for Chelsea this summer, Matthias Tell.
Yeah.
I think in the summer, you think he stays at Bayern Munich?
Bayern have said again and again and again, they're like, there's no way we let this guy go. We love him.
45 million quid.
Okay. I think profile-wise,
those are your options. You've got a lot of players there. I'm going to say if we're going to combine all the money here, you've got 300 million to spend. So there's lots there. 15 million on Cherki is nothing now, mate.
I think with Cherki, like, the thing is, I've seen a lot of Spurs fans saying this about like the attitude and stuff like that. He's a bums off seats kind of player, and I think when you're going through a time like we are now, it's like, okay, let's just try and feel a little bit of excitement. But I would have reservations about him translating to the Premier League. I think, as much as I think it'd be fun, like I think some of the ones that were kind of really
Go on,
catch
hit
my
to
eye.
me.
You also said before about like no leaders, like, and I do think that when you've got a lack of leaders, Cherki is a
shocking like a bit of an egg into the mix.
like if he went to like Liverpool, I'd be much less worried because there are like 5 guys there who'll be like, shut up, do what you're told.
Yeah, exactly. Spurs, I don't think that's
But if
happening.
Spurs, when it's a little bit of a bad situation, and I think especially when you're a manager who's a bit worried for your job, I'd be like, please don't bring him. It's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it, but I just think the upside for what could be is incredible.
Potentially, I think it's one of those ones where, if you've built the squad to the point where you've got everything in place and you just add that bit of star quality on top. The ones that stand out to
Give
me,
me your shopping
You're just
list.
on your North African like,
Yeah.
you're like anybody.
That
Okay,
is
all
it.
the Algerians.
What's his name? Ben Rama as
think,
well. Go on, hit me with your shopping list, Ben.
Antonio Silva is one that stands out. If we were, I know in my world we're not losing Romero, but again,
70 mil.
creating another centre back, more centre back competition. Obviously, you're going to lose Van der Ven for prolonged periods with the injuries. That's something you have to manage. Like one thing I mentioned earlier that we do lose without Romero being in the team is exactly what you said about Antonio Silva, someone that's able to put their foot on the ball and just control games, have that kind of pauser about them and be able to have a more, I guess, a wider passing range than maybe someone like Romero, who's brilliant at breaking the lines and so brilliant at playing on the halfway line and being progressive. Also, if you add like Kinski to that mix as well of having a centre-back and a goalkeeper that can really mix it up in build-up, makes you harder to press. So I like the idea of Antonio Silva.
So you want to go with Antonio Silva?
Let's go with Antonio
I'm gonna put that
Silva.
down
Because
70.
centre-back right now, because Tomori, I think in the summer, I just think that'd be a bit of a waste. I don't think we need a centre-back right now. I'd rather just persist with what... I think we need a full-back desperately right now.
Okay.
So I would be more inclined to go for Dorgu. However, I think Dorgu... He's still very raw, and again, if you're thinking about
It's quite
what
he's
you
basically
want,
a winger.
yeah,
really.
he's been playing right wing for them at points this season, isn't he? Like, if you want to add quality to the mix, I think I would maybe pass on Dorgu and look to. It kind of contradicts what I said earlier, but like Hincapié is quite an exciting, or Hato as well. Like he's a superstar, like in the making. I think.
That'd probably cost you less.
I think so, but I think, like you said, he might have loftier ambitions. It's about, again, like we said earlier, all about wages. Spurs
There
can
are
get
bargains, like Ferland Mendy, for example, is available on a free in the summer.
Yeah.
Like if you want to spend a bunch of money in other positions, you could always be like, let's just get that guy in, and he'll cover us. And we don't love him, but to be honest, Udogie's our starter, so like, who cares?
Yeah, true. I think I do. There's not many profiles of that versatility that can play centre back and left back. So I think Hincapié and Hato are like really exciting options.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Hato because I think he's young, and again, you've kind of balanced a decent signing with like.
Everyone picks Pats and shock horror.
Well, no.
Shock
To be
horror.
fair, how much in terms of money
Hato, what are we
left?
saying? 40?
45.
So we're up to probably 100 and
So
something.
you're at 115. You got 195, 185 left.
You've got as much money as you want.
I mean, I'd throw 100 million at Baleba, but because I think in terms of like if Ange was staying, I think he is one of those potential sixes that could cover a lot of the problems that we've got. However, I think if we're being more realistic, maybe because I think Baleba will probably go to a bigger club. Again, this is all imaginary, but I really like Angelo Stiller.
Cool.
I think because what Spurs lack at the moment in terms of having if you were to put him in right now, Spurs, in terms of their six or whoever wants to play in that midfield pivot, aren't very good at like. Stiller's got such a brilliant long passing range as well, being able to dictate the tempo and spray. If you're trying to undo a low block, Stiller's much better because he's like you can pen the team back. He can sit there and play the ball out to the wing, receive out to the other wing, and just pin that team back. And
You can play a double pivot as well of him and Gray.
100%. Gray gives you your legs, your
Benfica comes
engine,
in.
you're sweeping up the ground. Stiller sit there and just. That's actually like he wasn't great for Spurs. That's one of the things we've kind of lost in Højbjerg. Someone who can sort of dictate. He's not dictator, but like spray
Has
the
a bit
ball
of
a little
passing
bit.
range.
Like that's what Rice is so good at. Everyone
Yeah.
moans about Rice playing sideways. Sometimes you need that. It's not all about progression all the time. So I think Stiller would be. I'd go for.
You got
Angelo
150
Stiller.
left, Ben. 150 left.
We
Who's
need-
your attacker? I said Matthias
Matthews.
Tell, maybe tougher.
Yeah, I really like the idea of
Cherky's
Puig.
still there.
Uh,
Tyler Dibbling was saying.
I
maybe
would say
40,
I'm going to go for Dibbling
35.
because I think
cool.
in the future the idea of Dibbling on the right, more on the left, as two English young wingers. Dibbling's a lot more direct than Moore, and then you get your because I think also Dibbling can be a good Kulusevski understudy of like someone who can play central and out wide. Having Dibbling on the left, kind of being direct on the right. Sorry, cutting in, being direct in 5 years' time, and having Mikey Moore on the left, who's going to create a bit more, be that more of a dribbler, more skillful than Dibbling, who's just like, I'm going to pick the ball up, I'm going to run at you, I'm going to finish. I'm going to go for Tyler Dibbling.
I'm going to say 40 million for him. I actually think it might be more, I think they might get the 50 for him. Keep in mind, they sold Lavia. They sold Lavia for 45, was
Market's
it?
gone down.
In the champion. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
We'll put 40 just to give us some
If they're asking
room.
55 in Jan, then 40 at the end of the season.
I think that's
right.
fair. Yeah. Bear in mind, they're definitely going down. Sorry,
That's 188 spent.
And then I think
122 left.
another attacker. It's hard because I really like the idea of Akucha from Monaco. I think he's great. Like, can play right wing, left wing, number 10. Again, all of the things you mentioned. Like, I've been excited whenever I've seen him, and I know there's a lot of Spurs fans who, like, in terms of, we're always looking at young players. That's a name that's come up a lot. I think we also need someone that can, like, I really like the tell shout. Like you said, I don't think that's going to happen, but like, we need someone who can also play up front.
We can offer him 60. Maybe they say yes. You got a good relationship. You dealt with the Kane move.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
It's not going to happen. They don't have anything behind him.
None of these are going to happen.
it's a very good point.
I think at least a couple of those, like Dibbling is
Dibbling
not going to be on
I
the
think
realm
Dibbling
possibly.
would-
No, there's Stiller. If nobody comes in for Stiller,
true.
It was actually
would be a
reported
great
with
move for
Dibbling that
Stiller.
Spurs are the most competitive team in the race with Leipzig yesterday. So I think Dibbling to Spurs could easily happen. I'm trying to think of a.
To me, the part of the rationale is like Solanke's your centre forward. You're wedded
he
to
could
him.
be your-
Yeah.
And then Son is your backup centre forward. And I also think that, as you've talked about with Iraola, like, you can play different kinds of forward. Like, the idea that
that's very
Ouattara
true.
can play centre forward, it's like no one had ever really done that. Like, they're using him there now and they can get traction out of him. But I don't see why you couldn't have like Brennan Johnson playing that role as a different kind of striker in a game where you're going to be running into space. For example, if in Europe or against like, a City type.
Yeah, great point. I think we'll go for the versatility as well, and that we are looking at Iraola. Well, potentially. I'm going to go for I'll go for a course from Monaco. I think.
How's that
just
spelled, Pat?
AKLIOUCHE.
Yeah.
Beautiful. How much are we saying?
45. 50
40.
maybe.
All right, we'll put 50, just easier for the numbers.
There's some money in the bank. What I will do,
238 you got left. 238 we've spent.
I'm going to give myself a bonus for the rest. I'm going to follow Levy's kind of mantle. I'm going to reward myself with the rest of the funds.
With another 62.
62 million
Yeah.
quid to you. I mean, you could spend 15 on that on Cherki.
We've got so many attackers. I've just signed 2 attackers, and in this world, we're
So
keeping.
you've signed
We're gonna have to spend a
2
bit to get
defenders.
Iraola out of his
Yeah,
contract.
true.
Yeah.
To be-
There's at
And
least
also-
20 million on Iraola.
And also, I don't think I was selling it when we went through the kind of keep or sell. I wasn't selling any attackers because I think Johnson is a
you
frustration.
didn't sell any
but, like,
attackers.
I think
Yeah.
Johnson as a squad option will be good. It's just that he's not good enough as a starter. One player that I'd love to say for Spurs, and again, if Iraola was to come, I think Semenyo would be great. And Semenyo would be great
Yeah,
for a lot of
fair,
teams, but
fair.
that versatility, also shot volume, pressing, like he's
Let's put
superstar.
Semenyo down for 50. There
Yeah.
you go. And then we spend 10 million getting Iraola out
Yeah.
of his last year, and then there's 2 million for your bonus,
And the
mate.
rest,
There you go.
buys the beach house.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there we have it. That is another episode of Friday Feels done and over. A very Spurs special. Will be interesting to see what happens with them over the rest of this season. Will Ange still be there? That'll be the big story point. Patrick Van Straten, for people at home, where can they check you out?
You can find me at the Transfer Flow on your favourite podcast app and also on YouTube. You can find me at Unseen Incidents with Patrick and Pete. That's also on every podcast app.
Fantastic. Thank you guys as well for bearing with us with this podcast mic situation. I will definitely make sure I bring the other one next time. Benjamin, thank you so much, Mr.
Pleasure.
Ben Levy.
Pleasure.
I hope you have enjoyed it. Where can the people at home check you out?
YouTube, TikTok, you can just search my name. Also got a new podcast coming out on Monday, FC Bottle Job. Me and Seb Martin, who's another Spurs creator as well. It's not a Spurs podcast, it's a general football podcast. So that'll be coming out on Monday. So again, all good podcast platforms and YouTube as well.
Beautiful. If you have been listening to this on Spotify, please rate us 5 stars and we'll see you guys next week. Subscribe to the channel and all that as well. Bye.